Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell Movement.
Welcome to the Powell Movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and I want to wish all of you Americans a very happy holiday. I'm not sure if we still say Happy Thanksgiving anymore because it's insensitive. I mean, really, we stole a whole lot of indigenous people's lands, killed them, and I was taught it was a reason for celebration. And the way we celebrate here in the U.S. is with way too much food and American football. And given, I like turkey and football. But I also understand why some people use this as a day of mourning, and I feel bad for them. But humans are gonna human. And when bad shit happens to people, the people who do the bad shit try and forget about what they did. It's happened with Thanksgiving, it happened with the Holocaust, it happened with slavery, and I don't know where I'm going with this. I do know where I'm not going, and that's politics. Because while I have my thoughts and beliefs, you do too, and I respect them. There's no reason for me to push my beliefs on you. So again, where am I going to take this intro? To one of my favorite places, and that's a new sponsorship. And this time around, I have the highest tech product I've owned in a long time. I'm talking about the Insta360 X4 action camera. This thing is sick and 360 degrees. Think 2 cameras that capture everything. You always nail the shot. And I've been using the invisible selfie stick and just holding the camera up. And then when I edit my footage in my phone, I can get any angle that I want. I'm going to start posting show note type of videos on the gram, and you can see the footage there. There's a reason why this is the camera that Shaun White uses. And when you listen to their ad in the show, you're going to find a code that will get you a free ski pole mount. And snowboarders, this mount also works on your splitboard poles. So I'm fired up about my new camera, and if I was doing rad shit, I would post some footage of the clips I stacked. But since I'm old and I suck, those clips will involve my French Bulldog Chief and updates on my podcasts. I know you don't want to see an old sucky guy try tricks. You want to hear a great podcast with a skier or a snowboarder or behind-the-scenes player. And I don't have that for you this week. I have something even better. Branden Steineckert had the hardest childhood of anyone I've had on the podcast. Hands down, bar none. But skateboarding and music was his escape from reality. And while he didn't go pro with his skateboarding and he really wanted to, his music career created a platform for him to meet and become friends with his heroes. While Branden is known for his bands The Used and Rancid, he ties into this podcast because of how his music helped him create close friendships with people like Ken Block and the skaters that defined his childhood, and more. I should also mention that Branden is also the owner of Ghost Pickleball, and we talk about that a little bit in the podcast. While pickleball is taking over everywhere, it's also gotten huge within punk rock, and Branden has a collab Green Day paddle that you can get for Black Friday and a whole bunch more on his Ghost Pickleball website. That's enough of an intro of Branden. I really like how this one came out, and I think you will too. If you do, please share my posts on social media. I'm not an athlete or a musician with a built-in following, so each share really does help things grow. Every single one. And if you aren't sharing, and that's most of you, well, I think you secretly hate me. And if that guilt trip didn't work, well, just please tell a friend about the show. That'll help enough. At least that'll get one other person knowing about the podcast. But honestly, the most important thing that you can do is listen to my sponsor ads and buy their stuff. I only work with the best brands, and they are Insta360 Action Camera, Elon Skis, Stanley, Outdoor Research, Best Day Brewing, and Thermic and Descent Socks. Now, it's time to talk with Branden Steineckert. I usually start out these things with something that'll make you uncomfortable or put you on your heels a little bit.
Oh, perfect.
But we're not going to have enough time to do that because I have to tie this to action sports. And if I don't start with action sports in the intro, based on your story being so crazy, we may never get to it. So I'm going to start this one out with you were tight with the legendary Ken Block. First, how did you meet Ken?
Oh, man, he was like a brother. Rest in peace. I miss that guy so much. So back in like 2002, when I was making my very first album with my former band, The Used, my manager, Paul Gomez, was friends with Damon Way. And he was very like, he was tied in with everyone in the action sports world. And there was some convention going on in Southern California. I forget which one. It's like the huge, like
ASR,
skate, surf, snow. Yeah. Thank you. And so on like a day off from the studio, he took me to that convention knowing, I was a lifelong skateboarder and that I'd be super into it. And so while we were there, he was talking with Damon Way and introduced me and was like, yeah, this is one of my new artists. They're making their first record and whatever. And Damon was like, that's awesome. Like, here's my card. And I was like, fuck yeah. Cause I was a big DC fan, you know?
Yeah.
So anyway, so that connected me and Damon. I hit him up and, you know, cause at the time it was like the amount of clothes and things I owned could fit in a backpack.
Right.
And so I hit him up and then he connected me with this guy, Blair Marlin, who became a dear friend as well. And he was like, basically became like the rep for like artists, you know, he was working with like the Linkin Park guys and stuff like that. So whenever Blair would come to Utah, he'd hit me up and we'd go snowboarding. And then afterward, he'd take me over to the Mountain Lab. You know, I had heard about the Mountain Lab, knew all about it. And then he introduced me to Ken. Ken took us all to dinner after we snowboarded the Mountain Lab for a while. And from there, it was crazy to me because he would like thank me for supporting DC and wearing the stuff. And I'm like, what? Like, you guys give me free gear, dude. Like, I should be just kissing your asses, you know? Like, I couldn't quite wrap my head around the fact that I was like getting free gear from a company like DC.
But you were just like a poor musician coming up, and anything that you get is free is awesome. You're like one of those kids getting their first sponsorship box as a skateboarder.
Exactly.
And you're helping build their brand.
Yeah. And to me, it was like I was able to live out two of my dreams, you know, because I always like for the longest time, I didn't want to be a professional musician. I was determined I was going to be a pro skater. And I would like tell my bandmates in my early bands, I was like, yeah, you know, I want to skate. You know, this isn't what I want to do. I want to skate. So it was a rad way, like kind of feel like I was living out. It's like, wow, this almost feels like I have like skate sponsorships, but I definitely don't, you know? And so that was like fantasy stuff for me. And like, I wore drawers clothing so much in high school. Like there was a local skate shop that sponsored my friends and I. We had our own little like crew that we called ourselves Team Toy. And like, that was like me and my skater crew. And we were some of the only skateboarders in the whole like valley where I lived, this like small area 30 minutes south of Salt Lake City. And, you know, this is early and mid 90s when skateboarding was still definitely not the cool thing to be doing. So there just wasn't many of us. And like the local skate shop would sponsor us. And for some reason, Drawers stuff was the gear that they would like hook us up with the most with like discounts. So I had like a Drawers backpack and a bunch of shirts and wallet and all this stuff that I had like saved up and bought back then. And it was just a crazy full circle thing where like, you know, obviously Drawers evolved into becoming DC. And then, you know, what Ken did when he started his rally career and starting Hoonigan and things like that. But anyway, to fast forward back and answer your question. So Ken and I got to know each other with me just being a musician that repped DC. And then fast forward and him and I reconnected. Blair had left and became like an agent in the surfing world. Ken and Damon had sold DC shoes. He had started Hoonigan. And then randomly in 2014, Blair hit me up because he was coming back to ride at Park City. So we met up at Ken's house, went snowboarding and rode all day with Ken. And then Ken's like, man, you got to come back to my shop and see what I've been working on. Like, it's been too long. Like, we got to get caught up. And honestly, I was unaware of everything he had been doing.
Right.
Since he had sold DC. And so it was amazing, dude. He takes me down to Hoonigan headquarters, like where all of his cars and everything, you know, a very private, not open to the public spot in Park City. And he took me down after we were riding all day and just gave me like the grand tour and, you know, was taking photos of me and his cars and stuff. And we finally swapped information. And from then on, we just started hanging out all the time. And like, you know, that month alone, we were hanging out so much. And it was a trip, man. Like, as a little side note, it was looking back at the photos. It's a trip, and it was kind of heartbreaking and beautiful at the same time because I have like the photos of him and I next to his car and in his shop, and they were like right around like 4:15, and it was January 2nd, 2014. And yeah, it was just kind of crazy where it was like, man, that was the same day he passed away, and about the same time of day I found out.
That's so crazy.
You know, so it was kind of weird. The day we reconnected and really like kind of got into each other's lives and started hanging tons, you know, was on January 2nd. So it was pretty wild.
He dies in a snowmobile accident. You've experienced death before, but this is one where a dude dies being in his element. Does that make it easier or harder to accept for you?
I don't know that it was either, honestly. It was just tragic, but I got to say there was a lot of poetic and beautiful elements to it all that I think the family and stuff we would all talk about in those days after, where it was like our buddy was filming and having everything he did that was dangerous was being documented.
Yeah.
And he was doing it surrounded by viewers and film crews and friends and family, and everything was documented and everything was so extreme. And this day was a day that he said he wanted to be chill, it's just a epic powder day with him and 3 friends, that are all mutual friends of ours. And he was just taking it easy, and it was a fluke fucking accident, and no one witnessed it. It wasn't documented. And there was something just kind of beautiful to that, where it was like everything he did was documented, and the fact that no one had to witness it and have additional trauma, I think was a gift for all of us, in the way that it was hard enough to see him go and accept that, but at least there wasn't added trauma that his loved ones had to experience, or, some footage somewhere that existed of something horrific, or, you know what I mean? And so there was something to all of that that made it, I don't know that easier is at all the right word, but it just was a way to find a little peace and gratitude in the way that we're grateful that that was the way it unfolded, and that doesn't exist,
Yeah, and when you think about undocumented, I mean, this dude was an animal behind the wheel, and I'm sure you guys went on different car rides together that weren't documented at all. Was he one of those dudes where if you were just going to the store, he was driving fucking crazy? We were like, Jesus, man, it's crazy.
In the early days, like some of those days I was talking about when we go to the mountain lab, and then like we'd be done riding and we'd be heading into Park City to go eat, and I'm like riding in my buddy's like fucking whatever vehicle, because I don't own a car back then, and it was like he would have like his little just like daily driver Subaru, it wasn't like some crazy rally car, and we'd be trying to follow him down the mountain, this like skinny mountain road with these like snow walls, just going to eat. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, we could not keep up. And he's like drifting every turn, and like the back corner of his car is just like nicking these like ice walls. And it was just like, what the fuck is he doing? Like, and this was when I just heard, it was like small talk, like, yeah, he's kind of getting into rally, and he's got these Subarus. He wants to buy some land and kind of zip around. It was before he had gone to like the rally school and all of that. And this was while he owned DC. And so there was like times like that early on that was crazy. And then a couple times, like we'd go ride at the canyons, and we'd go up to this rad like spot he had that was some land he owned right by one of the lifts, and we'd park there. And same thing, man, just trying to keep up. Like, for the most part, he was a very responsible driver and didn't drive like a dick on local streets. But there were just a couple times when you get on some private roads where you're like, oh shit, Ken's being Ken. But then other times, we'd both be driving to my Southern Utah house, and I'm passing the guy that's towing a trailer in front of me too slow, and I go to pass him, and it's Ken, so it's like he was a responsible, good driver,
Totally. And then I guess we'll finish off the Ken Block part of the podcast with, what's your best Ken Block story? If you have to tell one that's just crazy fun, or just like the best story, what's the one you have?
Oh my God, man. That's so hard to choose. I always had a thing, like I would tell my wife, whenever Ken would hit me up to do something, it was usually something that I was freaked out the moment I was invited, like, oh, fuck. And I was already nervous,
Yeah.
And I was like, why can't we just go do something that like I'm comfortable with or good at? Or, it's like, it's always some sketchy shit that I feel like an amateur. We can't just go snowboarding. We're going to be like jumping under the ropes and going to the backcountry, passing the sign that says you'll die if you go back here.
Right.
And it's like, can't we just go on some like tree runs and like find some powder in a safe way? And I mean, one of them, we had a couple adventures that we went down to Moab, Utah. There was one I'll never forget that we did one called Porcupine Rim, that is out kind of near Moab a bit. And it was like 18 miles or something of downhill mountain biking. And granted, like I had just gotten a mountain bike. I've ridden it like maybe 4 times.
Right.
The first, like my second time I ever rode it, I went with him and Lucy, and we started with a hill climb up this like gravel hill that they call Puke Hill for a fucking justified reason. And him and Lucy are just beasts pedaling all the way up. And me and our buddy Ron, that was doing photos for him at the time, were just walking our bikes up there and struggling even walking up this fucking hill. So I'm a very amateur mountain biker. And then like he wants me to go on this trip and go ride this spot called like Porcupine Rim. And it's literally like a single track trail along fucking cliffs that drop like 1,000 feet. Literally like where there's zero margin for mistakes. I'm like, dude, what are we doing? Like, you know how I ride. Like, you know that I'm super amateur at this. And he always told me, he would tell me, he'd be like, I promise I won't get you killed. It was one of those like interesting things that, as like funny as it was, you know, it's like, okay. But it was like, a lot of us have talked about this. We talked about this after his passing, that it was one of those ways that Ken had this ability like no one I knew to elevate people beyond what they knew they were capable of. And that he wasn't just out to elevate himself and what he did, he would bring everyone with him. I loved it because I trusted Ken with my life very literally. And when he knew I was capable of something that I didn't know I was capable of, I would just simply trust him. And I loved that in turn, it made me trust myself more and have a little more confidence. And sure enough, we rode 18 miles on Porcupine Rim and got out of there unscathed and safe, and, you know, only a few accidents and blown out tires. But like, it was just the perfect example of I could just kind of throw caution to the wind a little bit, because if Ken thought I would be okay, I believed that, and I always was, you know. So I'll never forget that in him. You know, he really made me believe in myself more than I believed in myself.
That's such a rare quality that some people have. And when they can give you that confidence that you can actually do it, it's like, holy shit, it's so rewarding afterwards. Like, oh my God, I can't believe I lived through it. And they can be like, yeah, I told you I wasn't going to kill you.
Right? Yeah. I mean, it's different than when my older brother, you know, we'd grow up skateboarding and he's like, just fucking do it. You can do it. It's like, well, no, you don't necessarily know that. You just are going to enjoy it one way or another, because you're going to see me do it, or you're going to see me break myself off, and you're going to be entertained either way.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's a very different approach. Or like one of your friends, like, fuck it, just do it. You know, like with Ken, it was like kind of that attitude, but it was coming from a place of trust and skill, that it was like, oh shit, no, if you think I can do this, then you know more than I do about this. And so I guess that means I've got it. And I loved it, man. It was, like you said, it was a very unique thing, and something I will always cherish and try to hold on to. You know, it's one of those memories that it's like, all right, no, I think I'm capable of more than I give myself credit for. And I miss not having him there to remind me of that, but something I try to hold on to for sure.
Okay, and before you had Ken in your life, you were born in Pocatello, Idaho. Then you moved to Salt Lake City when you were a baby. It's mom, dad, and like 5 kids. Were you guys Mormon and involved in the church growing up?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. We moved. I was a baby still when we moved, so I have a hard time when people ask where I'm from, because I feel like to say I'm from Idaho or Pocatello doesn't make sense, because it's like, dude, when I left there, I was like a baby. But yeah, my family was very religious Mormon. I was brought up Mormon. Spent most of my life living in Utah. There was a moment we lived in Colorado for like, I don't even know, a year and a half maybe. Otherwise, my life's been here. My mom's family and my dad's family were all from California. My mom's family from like the Hayward and kind of Oakland areas.
Okay.
And my dad's family was from like Long Beach area. So we'd take a lot of trips out to California and stuff. But for the most part, yeah, I had a Utah upbringing in a Mormon family. I knew at a young age, you know, it just, things didn't quite rub me right. There was a lot that with religion in general, but the Mormon religion specifically, that I was just not on board with and didn't quite resonate with me. And so I would try to like kind of break out more and more and not attend where I could, but I was forced, you know, I was a minor living at home. I didn't have much choice.
Did you have to go to seminary and shit like that?
Yeah, I did.
Like before high school, you'd have to like go to school before school?
Yeah, it was literally like one more period they added to your day that you went and fucking sat through. But it was also the easiest one to ditch. And so I seldomly ever went until like I met a couple people and made a couple friends that were like a little more like-minded and seemed to be cut from the same cloth as me, musicians, and so if anything, I would go to just kind of like chat and be around those people. But otherwise, that was an easy one to ditch. But I ended up kind of dropping out of all of that by the time I was like, I mean, I was mentally checked out from an early age, literally like, 13, 14, I was just checked out. But I stopped attending when I was like 16, 17. And then I gave it a go one last time when I was like 19. I was going through a really hard time, had been through a bad breakup, and just felt like I needed something. And I was like, maybe I'll give religion a go, like on my own terms, and see what it's like. And I attended one day, and at the time I had like green hair and a nose ring and shit. And everything that the speaker talked about was so just fucking insulting. It was like this very, like the guy was telling this story about, he basically described me and about how this like kid showed up to buy his son's car on their porch and had colored hair and piercings in his face and all this stuff, and how he was so grateful that his son made the right decisions and all this shit. And it was just like, you know what, maybe fuck this place. And like, I don't need to come to a place like this to know who I am and to have, a sense of spirituality in my life. But I've just kind of been an agnostic ever since, where it's like, no, you know what? And to each their own. Just don't fucking hurt people. Don't mistreat people. Don't be self-righteous, and so a lot of my family is kind of the same way. A lot of my family is still very diehard Mormon, and we don't go there when the family gets together,
Yeah, but
there's a lot I really don't support.
It's time for my first sponsor break, and I'm going to start out with Insta360, a leader in action cameras and 360-degree technology. I just received my camera, and let me tell you, this is the coolest piece of technology I've owned in some time. I'm so stoked on my new camera. And why should you get one? Well, you can capture all the action on the slopes with the Insta360 X4. You can shoot a full 360-degree video in 8K resolution and then choose any single angle you want after your run to edit it in. It's so game-changing, and you can't miss the shot anymore. From immersive POV videos to third-person shots carving down the mountain, the X4 does it all. And when you're on the hill, you'll get over 2 hours of runtime at 5.7K in temperatures down to -4 degrees. It's waterproof, it's super tough, and it's easy to use with all your gear on. It's a social media content capturing machine. And guess what? I have a limited time offer for the first 30 Powell Movement listeners who buy an Insta360 X4 camera. You're going to get a free ski pole mount so you can record 360-degree action hands-free. Here's what you need to do. Head to store.insta360.com, buy an X4 camera, and when you check out, use the promo code POWELL, that's capital Powell, and you'll get this special gift with purchase. On top of that, Insta360 is having a 15% off Black Friday sale, so you can double up on the deals this week. Next up, it's Elan Skis. And while I could tell you all about the new award-winning Ripstick ski models and then push you to demo them at your local shop because they'll make you have more fun on the mountain, I'm just going to talk about your local shop. There's something special about stepping into your local ski shop. The smell of the freshly waxed skis, discussion about where to find the best skiing, and expert advice makes these shops more than just a place to buy gear. We at Elan believe that ski shops are the soul of skiing, a place where skiers can come together for genuine human connection. And that can't be replaced by going online. Going to a ski shop is an experience where you want to connect with a like-minded person who understands what you're wanting to do and wants to share their knowledge with you so you can have a good time doing something they love to do too. Shops are among the last authentic pieces of the ski community we have left. And here at Elan, we want you to support your local ski shop. You can find our list of dealers nationwide over at our website, elanskis.com, and remember, support your local shop. Last but not least this round is Best Day Brewing. And with snow season here, skiers, snowboarders, weekend warriors, tubers, sledders, snowmobilers, snowbikers, you get it. The doers of winter are getting ready to shred. And post-shred, it's all about après. And this year, do après the right way. Forget about the calories, forget about the alcohol, forget about getting in trouble on the way home, because with a beer from Best Day Brewing, You get all the flavor of your favorite beer, whether it be a West Coast IPA, a hazy IPA, a Kolsch, an Electro Lime, or my new favorite flavor, Nature's Pills. And you don't have to worry about anything but having your best day ever. Blind taste tests have proven that you won't be able to taste the difference between a best day and your favorite alcoholic beer. Really, the only difference is you're going to notice how good you feel in the morning after drinking a best day, and you're also going to remember what you did last night, which is almost as refreshing as a best day itself. So the next time you're at the store, pick up a 6-pack of Best Day or order one on your next Alaska flight, or you can always buy some on Amazon or over at bestdaybrewing.com. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. It seems like you picked up some of the good traits from the religion. Not that I'm going to say there's bad traits in Mormonism, but, I kind of judge some of the stuff at some times that some kids had to do. Yeah. But you definitely don't drink and you don't party. And that kind of stuff is good for like a person growing up in general. It makes you make good choices in life. So there's nothing wrong with some of the stuff that Mormons do. But then there is a lot of that other stuff that's a little bit weird. But you have 7 people in your family, and it sounds like you guys didn't have much money growing up. In thinking of the church, everybody gives like 10% of their money to the church. Does the church take care of Mormons that don't have money? Do they like make sure you guys are okay?
There's so much to all of that. I could dive down different roads with that statement and fill up the whole podcast. I will give them this. The years we didn't have Christmas and didn't have groceries, things like that. There would be a knock on the door and we'd open it and no one's there. And our porch is covered with groceries and a new microwave because we didn't own a microwave and things like that like the community aspect of it, they really looked out for their own. And it may have gotten me through childhood and teenage years, because it kept me from starving. Literally they have like what they call like it's been a minute. I want to say like the Bishop's Storehouse.
Okay.
And it's like a place that you can be granted like a small budget and go in and kind of shop for these like very low budget groceries, but just essentials, it's like milk, but it's powdered milk and shit. And like some bread and just like the very basics. But it was like we lived off that kind of shit for a while because we were just a very poor family. So I will credit them to me not starving growing up, and I'll give them that. Like, I appreciate that. But I moved around so much, and the drinking and partying to me never had anything to do with my religion at all.
Huh.
Life and experience are the reasons why to this day I've never tasted alcohol or done a recreational drug. Has nothing to do at all with the Mormon upbringing I had.
Did you watch rated R movies or drink soda?
I did. Yeah. And it was kind of fucked up. Like, I remember like as a family, we watched The Shining and Cujo, and like my dad loved like Rambo, like Stallone movies. That's my religion, like fucking Rocky and Rambo. Oh my God. Like I love that shit so much. So like,
he's your hero, right? Stallone.
Yeah, fuck yeah, he is. Like, I love that dude. Like Rocky, Rocky was like my upbringing, but one of my best friends was dropping acid when we were 12 years old, and he partied a lot. And this is a guy I loved and would take a bullet for, and I didn't judge him at all. I would have his back. I would look out for him while he was fucking tripping on whatever. I would pick him up from the bathroom floor when he was throwing up fucking blood everywhere. I'd pull him out of the bathtub with the fucking razor blades. And that guy alone was like a great life lesson for me because he was struggled with addiction and alcoholism since him and I were kids. And I loved him and would take a bullet for him. So it really taught me a lot. It's like, yo, I'm not fucking better than this guy. There's nothing like wrong with these things. And this doesn't make someone bad, but this also teaches me about excess, addiction, and I was learning like very hard life lessons early on because a lot of my friends partied, and whether it was harmless smoking weed or whatever it may be, I was around it so much with my little crew of friends that we'd be out skating. And if they want to smoke weed and shit, whatever, it was like, yeah, no, all good. But I have enough going on at home because my stepdad's beating the shit out of my mom and I got to go home and deal with that. And I don't know what I'm going to eat next. So I don't know that I need to introduce this kind of stuff into the mix and just potentially complicate things further. Like, I think I need a clear head to focus with this shit because I'm battling like depression and suicidal thoughts every day of my teenage years. And I don't think those things would have helped that. I think they might have made it so I wouldn't be here today. So that was where, to me, it was like, yeah, sure, I happened to be Mormon growing up, but that didn't shape me at all in whether or not I chose to partake in substances. It had nothing to do with that. And I think a lot of my values or principles in life are things I've learned and applied and come up with on my own, rather than being taught them and like being obedient to my teachings or something. You know what I mean? I'm just too naturally defiant to just follow and walk in line like that. But that doesn't mean everything I do is going to be against the grain and a fuck you to everything, because I'm not an irresponsible person. As an adult, especially, it's like, no, I want to make the decisions I make with intelligence and regards to my future, not just fucking always throwing caution to the wind, like, fuck it, let's do it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, your upbringing was so different than 90% of people out there, I feel like. I mean, you've just said a whole lot about your stepdad and shit that happened there. But before that even happens, when you're 11 years old, you're like a sixth grader, your dad commits suicide. I would think that messes you up. But what do I know? Over 20 years later, can you look back and see what impact that had on you? Did it kind of steal your innocence as an 11-year-old?
Yeah, I would think so. I think, I don't know that it's like a steal my innocence per se, because I feel like that almost leans the victim route. And I don't like to go that way with things. However, I do think in just the same point, but on the opposite side of the coin, I think it hardened me and forced me to grow up quicker.
Yeah.
But I was very much a child, and I very much am now. I know they say, in psychology and a lot of things, that a lot of the times we live and behave in a way that is making it up for that part of us that we lost at some point, or that we like part of us stops growing at certain points of trauma in our life and a part of us remains there. And I see that very clearly in myself, where it's like so much of me is that 11-year-old boy that was poor, lost my dad, learned about not only death, but suicide at 11 years old, and I was on a holiday break from school and went back to school, and, the teachers literally like going desk by desk and asking kids, like, what did you do over the Thanksgiving break? And everybody's like, oh, I went and did this with family. I did this and whatever. I traveled to this place. And when they got to me, I was like, I literally said, because I was 11, I was like, I went to my dad's funeral because he committed suicide.
Oh my God. Jesus.
And like the kids like laughed and stuff. And I like kind of looked around like, oh, was I not supposed to say that? Like, I mean? I didn't fucking know. Like, It was just like, that was what I did. And it was like, my teacher, like, the kids are laughing. She's like, shh, like, telling them all to be quiet. And then she just moved on to the next kid. And then she pulled me aside afterward and was like, wait, did that really happen? I'm like, yeah. And she like calls my family and like, it's like a whole thing. And I'm like, oh yeah. Like, and so it was just like, there was like really hard shit. And then to go straight from that, my mom remarried a guy that she met on a blind date, and like 7 or 10 days later,
Jesus,
from their blind date was their wedding.
It wasn't that long after your dad, right?
6 months,
Yeah.
6 months after he died, it was really fucked up. But again, I was 11. So at the very first, I was like, oh, cool. Like a new guy to be around and like a dad or whatever, and that went away really fucking fast. Like he had 5 kids. My mom had 5 kids. We all met one time before their wedding day. And, unbeknownst to me, they're like all these chemical imbalanced, fucking violent, aggressive people. And me and my siblings were just kind of happy-go-lucky survivors trying to make it through life. And that turned ugly really quickly, and to this day, I've never been a violent person or anything like that. But, we had front row seats to domestic violence from 11 on until I finally moved the fuck out. So it was like a weird fucking juxtaposition of like, I'd go out skating all day and be running from cops because, again, it's the early 90s and everywhere you skate is illegal in fucking Utah.
Yep.
No public skate parks and shit. And so we're spend our day running from cops, ditching school and all this stuff and just trying to whatever, and then get home to domestic violence that we're then having to call the same fucking cops to come to our house to break up this fight. And so it's like these people that you're running from are the enemy. Next thing you know, they're our lifeline and like, please fucking save us from this. And then they never once arrested and removed the piece of shit from our house. So then you're back to fuck these people. You know what I mean? And it was just a weird fucking like love hate, you know, like, are you guys here to save the day or to punish us for fucking trying to have fun or to leave a fucking abuser in the house with the kids and the family? It's like, fuck them. But thanks for showing up and breaking up the fight. You know, like, goddamn.
Yeah, man. I'm so sorry that your childhood was kind of like that. I mean, I'm sure you found good parts of it, but man, it was like, I've never had anybody on the podcast who's had to go through so much shit. And it's like, once one thing happens, then another thing happens, and then another thing happens. And for you, it sounds like skateboarding is what you dive into. It's like team toy, and you guys are doing your own thing. And I'm sure that's where kind of music comes into play, because with skateboarding comes punk and all kinds of different stuff. High school is when you get into playing music. And while your dad isn't here anymore, he's the reason why you get into playing music. What's the story behind that?
Yeah, that's the weird part, right? So one day I'm like 15 or so. Yeah, I had like long hair at the time. Just again, being defiant. My mom would try to get me to cut my fucking hair every other day. And that was my like, you know, rebellion, was to grow my hair out as a 15-year-old, you know, but like, so I had kind of long hair. And I find this photo of my dad, and it's him behind a drum set with this wig on, like a Beatles type wig of long hair. And it looked like a fucking photo of me. Like he looked exactly like me. And it's him behind this drum set. And I remember hearing that he was a drummer as a teenager and that he was actually pretty good. He would play like Wipeout at the school assemblies and stuff. But the weird thing is that my siblings and I, not once in our life did we hear or see him play drums. We never had drums in our house. I remember he would always tap on us. Like, you know, you'd be like sitting next to him watching a movie or something, and he's just tapping,
Yep.
like drumming. And it's like what I do all the time, and most drummers. But I never once in my life saw him actually play drums. But it was just like these stories of like him being this badass drummer and whatever. And so when I was 15, I was very depressed. My friends were getting more and more into partying. So skateboarding was kind of getting frustrating, where it's like, can't we just go skate? Like, fuck, like, why does everything have to just be like a party? I just want to skate and like get the fuck out of our house. And so when I saw that photo, I was like, you know what? I'm going to fucking save up and buy drums and learn to play drums, because my dad's like legacy, if you will, or memory has been so tainted with the bad that I want to do something that takes after him in a good way and try to celebrate his memory, even though I don't have memories of him as a drummer. But at least it's something I can do to take after him that isn't fucking killing myself, you know? And so I worked my ass off, bought my first drum set, took a couple drum lessons, lost interest and stopped doing that, and just learned by ear, just jamming with people. And it literally became like a secondary form of therapy for me. I was going to counseling, thank God. Like, we had state mandated counseling I had to go to from 11 on, because I had to, with the stuff that went on with my dad, and then with the domestic violence in our house, I had to go to it. And so I literally was forced to go to counseling all of my teenage years.
And you look at that as a savior?
Fuck yeah. I cannot put enough emphasis on the importance of therapy and counseling. And don't get me wrong, I hated it at the time. I hated it. But it's like going to the gym and putting in the work, you know? It's like, it might not be fun and rad, but the results are going to be fucking great if you put in the work. And to me, that was like a saving grace, is the fact that I had to go to counseling, and it was no choice. Days I wanted to be out skating with my friends, and I'm stuck going to this fucking office and talking about painful shit. It was like, that's not what I want to do. No one wants to do that, you know?
Yeah.
But looking back, it's like, thank fucking God that I did, you know, like, because I have a pretty level head on my shoulders, I feel like, and I credit it to that, you know? And then I would go home, and when there was violence and contention, or I was depressed or suicidal or whatever, you know, because I was, you know, it's almost monkey see, monkey do. My dad taught me a very bad lesson early on, that if things get too hard, you can always kill yourself.
Yeah.
And it was just like, no, fuck that. I need to unlearn that. So I'd put on fucking Rage Against the Machine or Nirvana or whatever. And I would just play my drums so hard and be screaming and crying and hitting. And next thing you know, it it started to groove a little bit, and it started to fucking make sense. And it was like that darkness and anger in me was kind of diluting and going away. And it was like, oh my God, I just found my new thing. Like, and it just started to take over. And skateboarding became like, when it just became a party, I would stay home and play drums, and ended up linking up with musicians and starting to jam, which gave me this just natural high that was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. And starting writing songs, and it just fucking took over my life, and it still does to this day. You know?
Yeah, so you've got all that going for you, or I mean, it's kind of like your therapy, and then drums are therapy. Skateboarding is too. How about school? How did you do there?
Not good. School was really just, younger school. I was in a different elementary school every year, sometimes 2 different schools in the same year, because my family moved around so much, being poor and just kind of chasing the next like cheap rent situation or whatever. So I was all over the place, had a very weird education just through elementary and stuff, because it was so scattered amongst different schools, school districts, communities, cultures. And then high school and junior high were just like, I actually like landed in the same school that we stayed put long enough that I actually had friends and people that I could stick around. And high school, man, was just like, I'm grateful for the experience, but also it was rough in the way that my school was zoned so weird, where the most wealthy neighborhoods, like the gated communities in our valley or city, all of the wealthiest neighborhoods were all zoned in this school. But then so were the cheapest like trailer parks. And where I lived was right across the street from a steel plant with railroad tracks in our backyard and a juvenile detention prison across the street. So I was in this like low income, really shitty spot. We were right by this gross spot that they would take animal carcasses from like hunters or like roadkill and shovel it all up and throw it in these boilers that they'd boil. And then they would sell whatever the fuck that was to like dog food companies and stuff. And so it was like the stinkiest fucking thing you would ever smell every time they fired that up, like once a day. So my friends and I'd be like skating in my driveway. There's trains going by, blaring horns. There's the detention prison across the street, and you're smelling these fucking animal carcasses. And like, it was so gross. So we were zoned in the same as the trailer park kids and the same as the gated community kids. And we'd all get bussed in while those kids all showed up in their brand new cars. And it just made for a fucking like what seemed like a really terrible idea. But I was grateful that it was as diverse as it was.
It's like the outsiders, kind of like the socias and the other guys.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And it was like, to say it was cliquey is an understatement. It was like the amount of classes represented and all of this stuff, and it was like, there were legitimate like gangbanger kids and drug dealer kids. And then you're like straight from fucking a movie cliche prom king and queen kids and jocks and stuff. And it was just like everything was represented there. And me and my couple friends were the only skaters. And it worked out nice because like the gangbanger kids and stuff and like the jocks, and I'm going to go ahead and throw out all the stereotypes that we would roll with back then, just for the sake of storytelling.
Sure.
But it was nice because there was a weird kind of respect that they all seemed to show us, because we had our very own unique lane, and that lane didn't infringe on anybody else's shit. It was like, nah, we're not here to fucking fight. We're not here to fucking take your girls. We're not here to fucking sell you drugs. We're just here to fucking meet up and go skate. So we would ride our bus in and meet up at school, and then we would leave and go skate all day, and then just make sure we made it back by whatever 2:50 or whatever when the buses left, so that we could get the bus ride back home and then try to turn around and go skate again. So like, I loved school in that way, but otherwise it was a very uncomfortable, shitty atmosphere, and being a poor punk skater kid in a school like that was very uncomfortable.
It's time for my second round of sponsors, and I'm starting this one out with Outdoor Research. Have you seen that black and white Mark Abma kit online or in the new MSP movie? If you haven't seen it yet, look them up before you buy your gear for this winter. They're sick. And not only are OR's products built differently and outperform just about anything thanks to being athlete and employee tested here in the brutal conditions of the Pacific Northwest, nowadays they have so much more style than the OR gear from just 10 years ago. When you bring in athletes like Mark Abma, Micah Evangelista, Zoe Atkin, Tom and Bass Van Steenbergen, and many more, and you have them sit down and work with designers and marketers, it's no wonder why the cuts and styles are looking a little bit different than that climbing-inspired OR gear that you used to see. It's really a game-changing difference in the fit and function of the gear, and the look, well, it really is incredible. And with the holidays right around the corner, get someone in your life the gift that will last over time. I can honestly say that I've loved OR since I bought my first raincoat from them back in 2000, and they truly make my ski days better. And while I may not be the best skier in the world, my outdoor research kit makes me look like a pro. And you can do the same thing by heading over to outdoorresearch.com, looking around the site, and treating yourself to the best. Next up, when it's cold out there, I don't hit the mountain without my thermic heated socks. They are the original heated sock, and still the industry leader after 20 years. I mean, if your feet are frozen, it's going to ruin your day, and you're going to end up coming in early. And no one likes that. And that doesn't happen to me because I always wear my thermic socks. And this year, they're better than ever. Thermic's new smart elastic technology heated socks, think a high-performance fitting thin ski sock where the patented heating components have stretch rather than a bulky heat band element. They literally feel like you're wearing your normal favorite pair of performance ski socks with heat. But if heat isn't for you, don't worry. Thermic has you covered with their athlete-tested and proven Descent line of socks. Some of you may be blessed with feet that never give you issues, but most of us aren't, and that's where Descent Labs comes in. They've engineered performance socks with their athlete team to eliminate things like chafing and heel blisters in your boots when you're touring or splitboarding. And for over a decade, the people at Descent have been making socks that have a distinctive, locked-in fit that never seems to change, no matter what you get up to. At the end of the day, Thermic and Descent socks are the go-to socks for people in the know. Drop into your local boot fitter and retailer and you'll see what I mean. My final sponsor is Stanley. And when Stanley started sponsoring this podcast, the story around the brand was that green bottle that keeps your grandpa's coffee hot. And that's still a story. But this week, they're totally changing the script. Actually, this year or the past few years, they're changing this script. And the latest big news around the brand is that they've signed Messi. The most famous soccer player in the world is part of the Stanley family. And while Stanley still sponsors me and Matchstick Productions, and most likely a snowboard movie that I don't know about, they've really matured as a brand over the years. I mean, they are the hottest or coldest cup in the world, and it feels like it. And it's still all about the product. Well, marketing with Messi and Olivia sure does help things, but if you don't have a great product, the marketing doesn't matter. And since Stanley has consistently had the best cups and bottles to keep things hot or cold since they invented the category in 1913, you need to check out what they're doing. While I still swear by the pint glasses that I use every day, which could be a perfect Christmas gift for the man in your life, I see so many other people out there drinking with that quencher cup, which is so popular, and I get it. For some reason, it makes you drink so much more water, and that's awesome. Really, these days, Stanley has something for everyone, and I'm going to save you 30% on all of your Stanley purchases. How am I going to do that? Well, when you head over to stanley1913.com and go shopping, then you check out, you want to enter the code POWELL30, that's a capital P-O-W-E-L-L, no spaces, the number 30, and you'll save 30% on all Stanley gear. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast.
Because we didn't attend, we were enrolled, but we certainly weren't attending. I ended up getting kicked out after my junior year, and they sent me and all my friends to the bad kids school.
Yep.
It wasn't bad kids by any means. It was just kids like us that were struggling. It was pregnant teenagers. It was drug dealers. It was shit like that. And we were all sent to the same school that had I think a total of 200 people. And there were fights there every single day. There were police officers there as security. It was just felt like a notch above, like a juvenile detention place.
Yeah, like what you lived across the street from?
Yeah, pretty much. We weren't locked in. But even that, I was still ditching school, and it just wasn't for me. I wasn't learning anything. I took art classes that I loved in high school. My art teacher is still one of my dear friends to this day at the better school. he was there for a while and was only like 6 years older than us or whatever, and was like the best guy ever for my friends and I. Changed our lives, and we still keep in touch with him. He's a dear friend. But I went to this like alternative school, and I took the art class, and it's like, oh, you're drawing a sphere and doing the shadows. I'm like, Jesus Christ. Like, I was in AP art, man. Like, what the fuck? And so I just left and wouldn't attend and ended up dropping out. Never finished school.
Well, it doesn't really matter that you didn't finish school, because eventually bands start to happen for you. And you've been in bands before, but The Used was the first real project, and I feel like you created it. Was it one of those deals where you're bringing people over to play, and when you get the right guys together, you guys just know you have a special chemistry?
Basically, yeah. It was kind of an evolution of my very first band. It was like, when you're a teenager in bands, it's like people come and go, and it's a rotating door. We had 45 different singers or whatever, it's like, oh, and you got this guitarist for a while, and this person, and then we had this bass player, and then we had like whatever, and we'd change the band name, and it would evolve, and eventually the lineup ended up being me and this guitarist and the singer, and we needed a bass player, and the three of us all ended up being the members of The Used. And so what we decided to do, because our singer could not sing, we all agreed that he would play bass and we would get a singer. And we knew this guy, Bert, from our local scene. He had just come out of rehab. He was a hardcore straight edge kid, like, dare I say, classic, like Utah straight edge kid. In the 90s and early 2000s, we saw this a lot, where straight edgers were very hardcore, radical, violent, things like that. And then the next thing you know, they were all on meth. And it was kind of a weird, like a good, accurate representation of like kind of the radical culture you get in Utah a lot. People are very strong one way or another on everything. And I was never into the straight edge thing because it had so many negative ties here in Utah that although I was a sober person, I never felt like that was me. I didn't need to like claim something. I didn't need a name to it. I just didn't party. I hung out with people that did. I just didn't do it.
But you weren't going to fight people for smoking cigarettes and shit like that?
Yeah, right? Like, I was the designated driver, making sure my friends got home safe and I got to drive their cars because they were all fucked up, So I had a great time with my friends partying. I just didn't do the shit. So Bert, our singer, had been this straight edge kid and then got into meth and then had just cleaned up and came out of rehab. So he wasn't doing anything musically. We knew he could sing. We knew he could scream. So we hit him up and had him write to this song we had just written that we were calling Maybe Memories. And it was just this kind of new style we were fucking with. We found a weird groove that we weren't really sure what it was, but we rolled with it. And it was like we finally stopped trying to imitate the bands we loved, and we just took their influence and applied it to the music. So there were elements of every genre of music in what we were doing. We didn't know what to call it, but we didn't give a fuck because it was fun. And then Bert, what he wrote to the song is exactly what you hear on our first record. And we were like, oh shit, okay, here we go. And I was a squatter at the time. I was off and on squatter for years. And just, we'd panhandle and whatever and get some money to go buy some chips and salsa or something. And then like go back and jam in whoever's garage would let us store some gear. And yeah, man, it just fucking, it took off from that. So it's basically this evolution of my first bands. And it ended up being the three of us that got that singer, Bert, and that became The Used.
And, when you're looking for a front man or you get a front man in Bert and you think about it, are they different animals altogether? Is it like almost only child syndrome with them, where it seems like in every band that you see, I mean, like the latest rendition would be Perry Farrell and how Jane's Addiction recently broke up. But it seems like the lead singer has like an ego problem in a lot of bands. Is that something that's common around music, or is that just something I'm making up in my head?
No, I think there's something to be said about someone who's vulnerable enough to be able to basically take their journal and share it with the masses. Like that's very vulnerable. When you're writing lyrics and poetry and whatever you want to call it, that is so personal. That's like literally getting up on a stage and reading your journal to people.
Sure.
So like there's a vulnerability there there's an insecurity that comes with some of the greatest lyrics and the greatest songs, but there's also a boldness and arrogance that has to exist to be able to do that. And so I think when you mix that extreme vulnerability, arrogance, and insecurity, yeah, you get a very unique kind of monster that some are a gift to all of us that have changed our lives with their music and their lyrics and their melodies. And some of them are a fucking nightmare that no one wants to deal with. And they're just pieces of shit that don't deserve a fucking soapbox. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's like, it's up to them and their journey of what they do with those tools. But I don't think you're wrong in the way that, you know, singers are a very unique breed. And a lot of them are just fucking terrible people. But I think it's safe to say, I would hope just as many are fucking incredible people that change all of our lives. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. And I think the best part about being in a band and building things, especially early on, is playing shows and seeing people react to the music and getting all stoked. What were your early Utah shows like?
There were very few. So there was this one venue that this one guy was, I'm going to just leave it vague at this guy and venue because that's as much fucking credit as they deserve.
Okay.
But they were so, I mean, you got to know that we're coming up in the same town as Brigham Young University. You know, the town we're in is the highest concentration of Mormons in the US. So you get either very hardcore conservatives or very hardcore not. And so people like punks, skaters, fucking like our genres, we really struggled to find a home and somewhere to play music. And this one venue or this guy that would be the only one able to make a venue happen would not allow our bands to play at that venue. He would call the police on us when we were hanging out outside of the venue and trying to go to shows, you know?
Just because you looked like derelicts, kind of?
Yeah, we were just punk kids, you know? But it's like, yo, we're not out there fucking like drinking and smoking in front of your club. We're not out there like causing, we're not fighting. We're just hanging out or we're trying to go to a show. But like we would start a new band, you know, hit up the venue, book a show and get, you know, 200 people out to our first show. And then afterward, he'd pull me aside and tell me that we weren't allowed to come back because they didn't want that kind of music at their venue. And to this day, I'm determined. I want so badly to open a venue here in my hometown because to this day, if you're a hip hop artist, if you're in a heavy rock band, if you're in a punk band, a hardcore band, any of that, you don't have a place you can play here in Utah County. People try, we'll open something that will stick around for a month, maybe a couple months, and this guy will get it shut down. And it's fucked up because his venues are just, you know, they're the home of like a lot of other cool bands have come out of there, you know, like the Neon Trees, Imagine Dragons, like some of these other bands that have come out of Utah came up in this guy's venue because it was more conservative and safer music and things they allowed that were like catered to that conservative college crowd. But there was nowhere for us to play. So again, I give long-winded answers. I apologize.
It's all good.
The rad part is there were skate parks opening up, you know, like they wouldn't last for long, but we'd hit up the guys that ran the skate parks and be like, yo, could we put on a show there? And we would play on the flat bottom of the half pipe, you know, and play a show like that. Or the big go-to ended up being in one of the small towns nearby. There was a small veterans hall that you could fit like 150 people in, and you could rent it, like no questions asked, just rent out the room for like $70 an hour. And so we would get money together and rent out this room. And these shows would literally be like a hardcore band, a hip hop artist, a funk band, and like this wild mixed lineup of bands that had nowhere to play. And we were putting on our own shows and then afterwards sweeping up the room and cleaning everything up so they never knew what went on there. And that was our best venue. Like the Veterans Hall to this day was the fucking best venue. But by the time I had started the Used and we were doing that, we only played like, I want to say it was like 6 or 8 shows before we made our first record.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it got to a point. I mean, granted, we had all played countless shows, you know, Bert's bands, our bands. We had played so many fucking shows. And we were kind of like, you know what? we don't need practice performing. We need to work on our songwriting, and there's nowhere to fucking play. And this is getting so old. Let's just work on our songwriting and dive into that and not worry about shows for a little while. So for almost a year, all we did was focus on writing songs, and those songs ended up being the first used record. And I submitted them to a producer, and I mean, that's a whole nother story. But yeah, so we didn't play tons of shows because our very first show as the used, every song we played except two of those songs did not go on our first record. But every other song we played that night was on our first record. And we played a song called The Box Full of Sharp Objects. And Bert's girlfriend at the time was a ballerina. And she got two of her friends, and just to be arty and weird, they painted their faces white, like kind of dead looking.
Okay.
And they came up on stage and did this choreographed like ballerina thing that they did to our song. And we just thought it was rad and arty and different and dark and whatever. And the show went fucking awesome. It was a couple hundred people for our first show, and no one moved a muscle. They just stood there staring at us, and we didn't know if they liked it or hated it. And then afterward, the feedback was nothing but positive. People were so stoked. And then that's when that guy told me that we couldn't play there ever again.
Oh, man. So
and it's just like, Jesus Christ, man. Like,
so you submit your songs to a producer, and he's like, you've got something here. And I would think from there, does it get shopped around to record labels? And do the labels kind of realize that you're in this unique category that no one else is really doing what you guys are doing? And is it almost like a courtship between all these different labels?
Yeah, that basically sums it up. I mean, it was crazy because I was doing the label game for so long, where I was the guy mailing out CDs of all my bands and cassettes and whatever the fuck they were at the time. But like, you know, you can't even get anybody at a record label to take your call. You're lucky if the receptionist doesn't just hang up on you because you're just another artist soliciting shit. So that was going nowhere with any of my bands. What I decided to do was found this green producer that had only done a couple things that didn't do well, and was like, maybe we try this route. And so I just started sharing my stuff with him, sent him a couple songs, and he wrote back. Like I had saved up about this really cheap, shitty computer, and I had this 8-track recorder that I bought. My sister, bless her heart, co-signed for me to get this like Guitar Center kind of credit card thing.
Okay.
So I was able to buy like a microphone and this little digital 8-track that I still have this day. And I used that and recorded and produced all of our home demos. And then I would email them to this producer guy. And I sent him the first 2 songs, and he actually responded, and he's like, these are cool, send more. And I was like, oh my God. Like, and that was like the greatest thing ever.
Just getting a response.
Yeah. Like something that wasn't just ignored or shut down, you know? And so we keep writing, do a few more songs. I send them to him again and get like the like word for word reply. Same thing. Like, these are cool, send more. I was like, oh, all right. This kind of feels like a generic thing he just sends to people that send him music, and he's just dragging me along. Like, okay, I don't know that he actually gives a fuck. So we didn't worry about that. We wrote like 5 more songs, or like 3 more or something. And then I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to try emailing them to him again. And so I sent those new songs to him. And the next morning, I'll never forget this. My little brother, again, coming from a Mormon family, my little brother was leaving to go on what Mormon, like 19-year-old kids call like a mission, where they go out for like 2 years.
Door-to-door shit?
Yep. Door-to-door salesman. He was leaving to do that. And this was like August of 2001. And this is when you can go to the airport and go to the gate and everything like that, because September 11th happened a few weeks later.
Yep.
And so my family and I, he has this like 6 a.m. flight to leave on his mission. So we're sending him off. We're sitting at the gate, just waiting. And I had got a cell phone at the time, and my phone rings. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, who's calling me at 6 a.m.? Some number I didn't recognize. I only knew a few people at the time, so that was weird. And I answer the phone, and it's this producer. And I'm like, holy shit. And he happened to be in Norway at the time playing a show. And he goes on about how much he loved the songs. He wants to bring us to LA and do a demo for us, and wants to take us on tour with his band. And I'm like in tears, dude, like so stoked. I call my bandmates, wake them up, and it was just a fucking, like, it felt like we made it, you know?
Yeah.
And then, yeah, September 11th happened. Everything was just fucking crazy. So we didn't know what was happening. It kind of put everything on hold while we find out what the fuck is even happening in the world, you know? And then that October, we flew out on Halloween Day and spent like 3 days recording 3 songs. He brought over the guys that ended up becoming our manager. One of them was that Paul Gomez guy that introduced me to Damon Way. Those guys loved our stuff. He sent it to an attorney that he loved our stuff, and he had been like Red Hot Chili Peppers lawyer their entire career and just has worked with so many massive artists.
Big time, dude.
Yeah. And we were just like, what the fuck? And those guys just took it and ran with it. And literally next thing you know, we're flying all around doing these showcases for major labels, all this shit. Like, it was overwhelming. I'm getting calls from like Matt Pinfield, who was working A&R for a label at the time. And I used to watch on 120 Minutes. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, who's calling me? You know? And
yeah.
It was a trip, man. The whole thing was a crazy whirlwind. But Warner Brothers, you know, Warner Brothers really got us. And our A&R guy, Craig Aronson, rest in peace. He passed away years back. But he was just like this, like, innovator that, like, you know, he's the guy that signed At the Drive-In, and he'd signed like so many rad fucking bands that were just outside the box. He signed Glassjaw. He later signed My Chemical Romance. He tried to sign Green Day back in the day. And he was just the guy that was like taking chances on stuff that ended up being huge or influential even.
Yeah.
And that guy really, really resonated with us. I remember it was really intense because we didn't want to get into like a bidding war and shit like that. We were just adamant. They were like, look, all we know of major labels is the talk we've heard. Being from small towns, we don't know a single band that's ever had a record deal. There's never been a signed band out of Utah State ever to a major label, a rock band. And so this was unknown territory. And so we would just tell everybody, like, what's important to us is absolute creative freedom. We don't want to be told what to do, how to do our songs, the fucking sequence of our songs on our album. Nothing. We want complete control because that's the nightmare we've heard about with labels. And we want budget to start touring so that we can quit our shitty day jobs. You know, I worked at a Burlington coat factory tagging women's shoes, you know?
Yeah.
It was like, I can't do this anymore, you know? And they were the first ones to be like, all right, like, we'll do exactly that, but we don't want to get into a bidding war either. If you'll commit to us, you know, because it got to like 12 majors that were trying to sign us. And the president of Warner Brothers was like, I'll give you everything you want. And I just don't want to have to get into a bidding war. So if that's truly what you want, then we're good. And we were good. I had a very awkward, not to make a long story longer, but there was one day the producer, they didn't want us to use him because he hadn't done anything that did anything yet. I mean, he was very green and new, and they wanted us to use somebody else. And I get a call from both of our managers and our lawyer calling me because I was kind of the business guy in the band. I started the band. I produced the demos. I named the band. Just kind of did everything, you know. They call me up and they're like, all right, here's the deal. The president of Warner doesn't want to use this guy. You need to call him and tell your stance. They don't want to hear it from us. This is where we're at. And I'm like, oh my God, like, all right. And so I call this guy up and I'm like, hey man, he's like, hey, are we good? We've, you know, done everything you talked about, everything you say. I'm like, yeah, but we just need to know that our producer is going to be taken care of. And I was like, if you can guarantee us that and we're good, then we're good. And he's like, all right, you have my word. And I was like, no, that's not going to cut it. And I was like, I need to hear it from him. I was like, so I need you to get on a phone call with him and I need to hear it from him that he's going to be taken care of and he's going to be all good. And he's like, all right, I'll talk to you in 15 minutes. And I'm like, oh, fuck. Like, okay. He hangs up the call. I'm like, oh, fuck. Oh, fuck. Like, what did I do? Like, it was the most scary, like, intimidating call of my life.
Cool flex, though.
Right? I'm like, oh, my God, this is the president of Warner Brothers. Who the fuck am I? Like, trying to, like, strong arm this dude at all, you know? And then our producer called me fucking 5 minutes later, like, in tears. And he's like, dude, I don't know what you did, but it worked because I'm good. I'm like, really? And he's like, yeah, we're fucking good. I'm like, fuck yeah. And so I call back this guy, the president of the label. I'm like, man, we're good to go. Thank you. He's like, awesome. Can't wait. We'll send over the whatever. And it was done. We committed and went from there.
So you go on the road for like 2 years, it sounds like, and you spend maybe like 20 days at home between shows. So you're not really going home much. And for lack of time, I'm not going to talk too much about that early touring. But what I am going to talk about is the Warped Tour. I think you get on it in 2002. And is that like the equivalent of getting an invite to the X Games for a skateboarder? Like a really big fucking deal?
Right? Yeah, absolutely. And then, but it was like getting an invite to the X Games and then being told you can skate the curb outside of the venue. You know?
Yeah.
Because we get Warped Tour and it's like, oh shit, yeah. And then we got to play on like the smallest stages that weren't even stages. They were literally like wood pallets with plywood over top of them. That was our stage under like a tent, you know? And it was like, oh fuck, like this is what we're doing. This is when like Warped Tour, the budgets just weren't there. So there was no water. Like if you weren't like a main stage band, you weren't getting like stocked up on water. We had never toured in a bus. We were only touring in a motorhome up until Warped Tour. And what they helped us figure out was a shared bus that was 3 bands on one bus. And it was the most piece of shit. The refrigerator didn't have a door. You know what I mean? So there was no refrigerator, like no air. So you can't fucking hang out on there. And so we're just like out hiding under tents and trying to find anything we can drink all day. Easy Mac was one of the tour sponsors at the time. So we'd nab a bunch of Easy Mac and fucking microwave it on the bus and eat that. And, you know, because catering was the same shit every day. And so you just needed a break. And I remember like, dude, we couldn't get waters, but Yoo-Hoo was one of the sponsors. And we made friends with the people. And so they'd hook us up with cases of Yoo-Hoo. And there was literally fucking shows we were playing under the tent on this fucking plywood stage thing. And, you know, you'd be hot as shit. And then you'd go to drink a drink in between songs. And all there is Yoo-Hoo. So I'm just like swigging fucking this whatever chocolate milk shit. It was just like, oh my God. Like, I didn't know being a signed band on Warped Tour meant this. Like, this is almost worse than the panhandling was. Like, holy shit. So we definitely put in a lot of work. And then fast forward, and by the next year, we're on Warped Tour again. This time around, we're one of the headliners, and we're on the main stage. Rancid's on that tour, AFI, Dropkick Murphys, Glassjaw, Thrice, like all these amazing bands, so many friends. You know, we had a great time both years, but 2 very different experiences for sure.
And one thing with Warped Tour is there were athletes there. I mean, they had like, I think the moto part, and they had BMX, and they had skate, and that was all going on around there. Was there a backstage area where all the athletes were hanging out with all the musicians as well? And did you get to meet some of the people that you grew up watching skate?
You know, if there was, I didn't know about it because I didn't. I saw like Caballero around a couple times, which was awesome. But for the most part, I never got to meet or interact with anybody like that. Like over time throughout my career, I've got to meet almost all of my like skate and action sports heroes and even become friends with them now. And it's mind blowing. But Warped Tour was not the place that started. You know, like I was seeing very few people, you know, maybe like Rick Thorne here and there or Caballero, you know, but for the most part, all of those relationships came later.
When you think about relationships coming later, I mean, the biggest skateboarder in the history of skateboarding, it seems like, is Tony Hawk. I don't know if there's anybody else bigger that I could think of.
Right.
Do you meet him, and do you have a good Tony Hawk story you can share?
Yeah, there's quite a few. So Tony's actually a big Rancid fan.
You guys played their wedding before you were in the band, right?
Yeah, which was I would have loved to be there for that gig. You know, they went to like Fiji or something.
Yeah, totally.
And played at Tony's wedding. Amazing. And so I remember the first time I met him, we were going to have Tony and Kevin Staub come. We had this half pipe in our warehouse of our merchandise company at the time that we were running our own merch company for like a shitload of punk bands. And we were filming a music video for our new record. And the idea was for us to be set up on the flat bottom of this ramp and have Tony come and skate it, him and Kevin Staub. And so the night before, we happened to be playing in San Diego, and Tony came out to the show, and I met him briefly, and I was so fucking stoked, like couldn't believe it, like, you know, like just always loved that guy and looked up to him, you know. And again, I started skateboarding in the 80s, so it's like he was just the guy. He was always the guy, you know. So when we're filming the video, in between takes, I'd grab my board and jump up on the ramp and skate with him. And then it was fun because I would just be doing like my old school moves, you know, fucking like full cab rock and rolls and whatever. Like, you know, not much. We're in the middle of a video shoot and I can't afford to get hurt at all, of course. But Tony's like, whoa, like, all right, you're doing like some proper, like full, like body tricks. Like, he's like, most guys just want to like jump up and flash a bunch of tech shit. He's like, I can tell you've got like actual roots and you're not just a tech guy. And I was like, oh yeah, no. And I was like, I really only have one like decent trick in my bag. And so like I get them to like roll camera, which I don't know why the fuck this didn't end up in the video. I was so mad. Maybe their clip didn't get it, but we're on a mini, but it's a 6-foot mini, you know, it's just got slow transitions, like chill transitions, but it's still a larger ramp for a mini, for me. But so I'm like drop in, doing my run, and here comes like my one trick, and it's just a blunt to rock and roll. And I fucking stuck it. I stuck it in front of all my bandmates and Tony Hawk and Kevin Staub, and like Tony's slapping the coping and shit and cheering. And to me, I was like, oh my God, like if you told me at any point coming up that one day I would be the drummer of Rancid, filming a music video while skateboarding with Tony Hawk and get to do a fucking trick that impressed him and made him slap the coping, I would never in a fucking million years believe you that would happen. And there I was, like, it was just insane. Like, even just telling the story sounds made up because it's like, it's too crazy. Like,
it's every kid's dream.
Yeah. Like all in one fucking event. It was unreal.
And so you talk about being a drummer in Rancid. So I'm going to fast forward. In 2006, you were kicked out of your band, the one that you started and you ran all the business around, and you're kicked out because you don't party. And while that's one thing, did you ever have any issues with them partying?
No, that's the thing. Our singer Bert and I talk about that a lot. We actually just had another great call literally a week ago and reminisce some of that, because the only problem I ever had, he partied hard, man. Like, we were getting a reputation for it because how hard he would go. But my whole thing was when it started affecting us, canceling shows and things like that. So I would be the guy, and we were laughing about it because he'd be eating shrooms at 5 a.m. or whatever and up all night and canceling sound checks and wanting to cancel a show. And I'd be bringing him soup and fucking Tums and anything I could to kind of nurse him back to health, you know, and just always had his back. And it was like, I didn't judge him for what he was doing, but I did have strong feelings about how it was affecting our career. And so I'd be like, yo, come on, man. Like, and, you know, and so I was just trying my best to literally like nurse him back to health. And it was really frustrating. It was a really hard role to play, you know? And then because again, we were 3 sober guys and this one partier, but then when you fast forward, the other 2 guys started partying too. And we just, our backstage became this cliche of just like sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And meanwhile, like, I'm engaged to my girlfriend that was my best friend on earth and is now my ex-wife, but still my best friend on earth and my wife's best friend. Like, she's the fucking coolest person, you know? And it's like, I was in a monogamous relationship. I didn't party. So I just was like the out guy, like, you know, I didn't fit in. And ultimately our guitarist, who was having his own meltdown crisis, and our bass player was always just kind of going along with whatever, just to make sure he didn't lose his job. You know, he was learning how to play bass when we made our first record, and he was just doing everything he could to just not rock the boat and to secure his place, you know. And I always had his back, you know, when they tried to fire him and bring in somebody else to make the records and stuff, I would put my foot down and always stood up for him. Our singer, being the wild guy he was, he would just do his own thing and would be oblivious at times of what else was going on. And so this was really just our guitarist, who all of a sudden was just like having his own crisis because he resented his family. His mom was selling his little brother weed when he was 11. Like, it was this weird dysfunctional situation. And it was getting all of his anger and issues he had with himself was all getting aimed at me. And he was the one that fired me for not partying with the band and for being too different. And it was heartbreaking, man. I was gutted, lost my own band because I didn't fucking do drugs with them. Like it was the dumbest shit ever.
No, it's so crazy and it sucks so bad for you. And does it kind of just make you pissed off at the whole music industry? Do you kind of just shut down for a bit?
Yeah, I was done. When that happened, I was like, fuck this industry. Like I've been honest in all my business. I've been fighting for integrity in everything we do and making sure that, like I said, like that we're standing up for each other and making, whether it's fighting for our producer to get the job, whether it's fighting to get the freedom to do everything our own way, whatever it was, I was fighting and fighting for this to just be something with integrity and something to be proud of and just trying to be a good person. And I was like, this is what I get. Like, no one's got my back in this. Everyone's just looking out for, we were about to make a new record, our third album, and everyone just wanted the money that they knew was going to come in on that. So no one had my back because they're like, well, what else are we going to do? And it was just a gross situation, but then I was getting these like pep talk phone calls from Max Weinberg at the time, Springseed's drummer, who was a friend of mine, and he would tell me about what he went through when Springsteen had broke up the E Street Band in like 87 and how Ringo Starr would call him and give him pep talks and all this stuff. And that he wanted to do the same for me. And I was just mind blown. Like, what the fuck? You're talking about Ringo Starr giving Max Weinberg pep talks. And now Max Weinberg's giving me pep talks. Like, what the fuck? Like, and it was really inspiring. And I happened to be on my way to a Rancid show and was on the phone with Max the whole way up and got off the phone just pretty fired up. And then the Rancid guys talked to me like, yo, we heard what happened. Hang out after the show. We want to hear what's going on. And so we all hung on the bus afterward. They had me tell them the whole story. And they were just trying to pep talk me too. Like, just hang in there, man. Something will work out. Hang in there. And so I just went home fired up and was like, you know what? I'm going to fucking keep going. And I started playing drums for the first time in 3 months. Started playing every day. And then that starts the next story.
Yeah, and we're not going to be able to get into all the next stories just because of time, because I have a hard stop, unfortunately, in 12 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I mean, we had an hour and a half and whatever. I pushed my meeting back, but I've still got to get through some other shit with you. So
yeah.
you end up getting into Rancid, and it's crazy that you go from the Used to Rancid just like that. And it's like 2-3 months. They have you work on some songs. You do a few songs. You fly down to LA or wherever they are. You play with them. They're like, shit, we want you to be a quarter member of the band, 25% member of the band. And then you guys go tour Europe. And 15 years later, you're still in Rancid. You're the most tenured drummer that band's ever had, which is incredible. And they're like your favorite band. So that's even better. Yep. Does it make you feel good almost? Or how does it make you feel to think that those guys in the Used, while they had something going, it all went to shit? And you went to another world where you're in a much bigger band than they could ever dream of being in. And it was just because they wanted to shit on you almost because you were the glue that held everything together.
It's wild, and I never wanted to, I mean, literally as of November 1st, it's been 18 years that I've been in Rancid. It's insane to think I've even had the job I've had for 24 fucking years or whatever it's been. I don't even know, 22 years, whatever it's been. It's crazy. But yeah, it was like, they say success is the best form of revenge, but, but I also never thought of it like that. Cause it was like, I really had to check myself a lot of times. I was working through a lot of anger and resentment and everything when I got kicked out of the band. And then to watch them, they went to submit their third record to the label and it was rejected. And when I first heard that, I was stoked, and then it's like, no, that's petty as fuck, dude. Like, come on, like, no, do better, be better. And then it was one of those things where I started to think about it and I'm like, all right, how does it serve me if this band doesn't do well? How does it serve anybody? Is there anything for the greater good if they don't succeed? No. So why fucking hope for that or celebrate that? It's like, if anything, I hope they become the biggest band on earth and I get my royalties from my first record still. So that would be great. Like cool. Like, fuck yeah, go kill it, guys. And it's like, the part that hurts me is when I hear the band struggling or they're not playing our old songs quite the way they should be played and doing them justice. And things like that were a hard pill to swallow for a long time. But now I'm just like, you know what outweighs all of it is to see how much the albums that I made with the band, those 2 albums are the most celebrated and means so much to people. And it was saving people's lives. And I think about the things that had that effect on me and how important that music was to me that saved my life. And I don't wish anything but the best for the U's, like I want them to just succeed and kill it because I know how much it means to people. And that means more to me than my ego and gloating in some failures or some bullshit. It's like, fuck that. Like, I want them to do good, and I'm doing good. And I don't know what tomorrow brings, but I just know I'm going to give my all to anything I do and hope for the best, and always just keep fighting.
Awesome, man. Well, it's a great attitude to have. Well, we could talk more about music, and I should bring up soccer because you're a huge soccer fan for Real Salt Lake.
Yeah,
or whatever they say. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the sport of pickleball. How did you get involved in playing pickleball?
It's like so many people in early 2020 when all of a sudden we're shut in and like, what the fuck are we supposed to do with ourselves? Like, my wife and I had moved to southern Utah to what was supposed to just be a vacation home that ended up becoming my primary residence. But we were just literally like looking for something fun to do and get outside, and had heard little things about it. I went and bought some cheap paddles. We went and played one time, and it was fun as shit. And I was building a new house at the time. I was like, fuck yeah, I'm going to put a pickleball court in at this house because that's how I am. When I get into something, I don't dabble. I fucking go head first. And so I put a pickleball court in. It was fun as hell, and I fell in love with it. A lot of people do. The only people that don't like pickleball are people that haven't played it. You know what I mean? Like, it gets a bad rap, but it's a fucking game. It's surprising that it's something people have like negative feelings about. It's like, really? This is like ping pong. Like, how you can be mad at ping pong?
People get mad here in Seattle because of the noise, and they get mad because they're tearing up tennis courts or turning tennis courts into pickleball courts. But they're all old people who don't play anything anyway.
That's the thing. If those tennis courts were being used, they wouldn't be tearing them up.
Exactly.
And when they're talking about noise, it's like, yo, it's a plastic ball hitting a paddle. Like, this isn't exactly like loud noises, But to me, it was like, I just was loving it. But I was like, wanting to get rad gear and good paddles and stuff. And everything was so bland and fucking everything just looked the fucking same. And, like I would riff with Ken Block about it and be like, yo, I might start my own pickleball paddle company. And he was giving me great advice and a lot of good pointers. And then I had teamed up with a company that I wasn't feeling. It wasn't what I was going for. And so right after he passed, I was like, you know what, fuck it. I'm doing my own thing. And I'm taking Ken's advice and I'm going to do it my way, and I'm going to make it fucking cool, and it basically is like, takes everything I love about skateboarding culture, action sports, music, street culture, street art. And I just have brought all of those elements I love and tried to bring it into pickleball and make it something fucking cool where like your paddle is cool, and kind of rolling with it like it's skate graphics, and it's like, yeah, you want a good board that has like some good snap to it and stuff like that, and a concave that feels nice, but we also enjoy a rad graphic, and there's a reason we hang this shit on our walls, because it's art. And so I'm just taking that approach to pickleball, and I started my own company, Ghost Pickleball, and again, just bringing all of those elements into it and have kind of a street style pickleball company that's been tons of fun.
Well, that is awesome. I am going to get on a call with you after this at some point. You can be at your house, and we're going to talk about selling you stickers that should go with every one of your rackets, but that's a different conversation. I end every podcast that I do with something I call Inappropriate Questions. And
Rad.
What I do is I usually get someone that to ask 3 inappropriate questions. They can be anything. And I did have a couple people, but no one could actually get the questions for me, unfortunately. So when that happens, I go and ask the questions myself. And I came up with 3 ones. They're all going to be quick hitters. And the first one is, while you don't have to name names, what's the wildest situation you've seen drugs and alcohol get a person into?
Oh my God. Wow. That's like trying to pick from a barrel of shit. It's always like things that are kind of tied around it. One of my favorites, I'll do a quick version of it. And it doesn't actually tie into it, but it's more of a morning after kind of thing.
Okay.
So Bert and I got chosen to be the 2 to go to Much Music in Toronto to do an early morning interview while on tour. Early morning for either of us doesn't really work. And in all fairness, it was probably like noon, but to us, it was early morning. But Bert had a long normal night before, so it was a little brutal. So we get to the TV studios in downtown Toronto, and we're mic'd up in the hall. We're waiting, and there's like this monitor with like, this hallway of monitors of like 5 or 6 TV screens that are all showing what all these different broadcast networks are airing at the time. And on the wall, there's this random fucking power switch, like this huge lever that just says main power, like out of a cartoon. And my dumbass turns to Bert and points it out. And I was like, you think that's for real? That was the real fuck up. And our rep had just walked off to go get him a coffee and all this stuff. We're just trying to kind of feel good and get ourselves going. And so Bert walks up to this lever, pulls the fucking lever. All the fucking lights go out. All those TV monitors go out. Everything goes out. And we're like looking at each other with the hugest eyes, like, fuck. And he pulls this lever back on. All the lights come on. All of those TVs just have the rainbow, like kind of thing on them. People are running frantically everywhere. Our rep comes back, just like holding Bert's coffee, looking at us like, what'd you do? And we're like, Bert just pulled this lever. Like, we didn't know. Like, why the fuck is it in the hallway without a lock? And like, like as if it was not our fault. And then he runs inside to fucking check on things and comes sprinting back out. And he's like, pull those microphones off you and drop them. We're leaving. And we're like, oh my God. And we literally had to run out of the fire escape and get the fuck out of there. There were like 7 different networks, like major networks that all broadcast from there. And by him pulling that lever, they lost communication with their satellites for like 2.5 minutes or something like that. God. All of those networks were completely off the air, just losing money and all this shit. Like, and we were like, oh, fuck. And like, so fucking freaked out. But it turned out like the head of the network ended up coming to our show that night because he thought it was the funniest, raddest thing that happened. And we ended up getting in no trouble at all, but it was pretty unreal. So that didn't actually directly tie into drugs and alcohol or partying. But I think as a result of the night before, he wasn't in the best place and I wasn't either. And it led to that.
Well, that is a good one. We'll go to question number 2. What bands call themselves punk that have no business doing so?
I'm not into all that. To me, I say, fuck it. Like, if you're going to say you are, you are. Like, this is music for fucking everybody. To me, I got into punk rock because I felt like I had nowhere to go and nowhere that I belonged. And I thought I found a community of people cut from the same cloth to me. And it was somewhere that the outcast could go and fucking not be outcast. And so to have that community and to fucking all of a sudden have rules that there's a right and wrong way to be an outcast. There's a right and wrong way to go against the grain, to how to fucking dress, how to sound. I think that is the most contradicting shit and ruins it. To me, there's not a right or wrong way. If you're a fucking outcast, you're a fucking punk. That's your approach. That's your attitude. That's your fucking whatever. It's not a black and white thing. I think it's an open fucking to interpretation, and it should be. So me personally, I know a lot of people might disagree with that. I say, fuck it. If you fucking say your music's punk or you're a punk, then you're as right as the fucking Ramones or the fucking Sex Pistols. That's my feelings. It's open for everybody. That's what makes it special. It's for the outcasts.
All right. My final inappropriate question. You've met a lot of your heroes throughout your life. I'm sure most of them are awesome. Was there one person that stuck out as like, man, that was disappointing?
No one that stands out super disappointing. Like, I mean, I guess for the sake of the story, like one that was kind of lame. I wish I had a better answer, but it's kind of a good thing that I don't.
Yeah, totally.
Because I've been more pleasantly surprised more times than I've been disappointed. I will say in my circle, a lot of the punk and hardcore and stuff like that, I feel like there's been a lot more what I would dare call frauds than I expected. People that talk the talk but absolutely don't walk the walk. That's been disappointing. But that's not, tying back in my own other thing. It's to each their own, but don't fucking preach something you're not practicing. One kind of lame thing though, this was a dumb one, but just for the sake of an answer, we were doing this private like fundraiser party thing for this school of music that Flea does. It's awesome. And it was this literal backyard party for Flea's birthday. They had like this awesome art collection they were auctioning. They had an original Banksy piece that Banksy donated. It was incredible. And it was this really expensive dinner to raise all this money for this children's school for music. That's incredible. So Rancid was playing, Chili Peppers played, like a handful of celebrities were there. Tony Hawk was there, and like a bunch of fucking rad people. And then Owen Wilson was there. Edward Norton was there. I met him and talked to him for a while. He was awesome. I chatted with Owen Wilson for a minute. Edward Norton was rad. Like we got a photo together. He had his wife take a photo of us and stuff. He was super cool. And then Owen Wilson, we were about to play and he was just by himself looking at some of the art stuff. And I was chatting with him and I'm like, yo, man, like, can I get a photo with you? And he fully shot me down and was like a dick about it.
Oh, it's so lame.
And I was like, dude, like, I'm literally about to go perform for you and we're here to raise money. And like, this is a private thing. Like, I'm not fucking interrupting you at a restaurant or some shit inappropriate. Like, this is a very appropriate place for this kind of thing. Like, I didn't say any of that. I was just like shocked. Like, oh my God. Oh, okay. Maybe fuck you, dude. Like, I don't want a fucking photo with you, man. Like, but who knows? I don't know where he's at that night. Maybe he's in a bad place. It's,
Yeah, I guess it's all the day you catch somebody on.
Yeah, what I mean? Whatever. He doesn't, it's no entitlement. He doesn't own the fucking. It's just one of those shocking, like, Jesus, man. All right. And just a reminder of like, I want to always take time for whoever. Like, I don't give a fuck if it, whatever. So again, kind of a weak version of the answer, but that's the first one I can think of someone not being very rad.
Well, you answered it, and that's Inappropriate Questions, and that's our podcast. And based off your early childhood, if I had to predict where you'd end up in life, I wouldn't predict that you'd be where you are today. I would guess that you'd use music, skateboarding, and your friends, and not using substances, and all that combined with therapy throughout life, just to get yourself in a good place where you could function. But it's really cool to see someone like yourself who's always had the cards stacked against you to defy the odds and become a huge success. You should be super proud of yourself for never giving up and eventually finding an unconventional direction and taking that to the top. Not too many people are willing to take the risk that you did to just go all in on music, but really it didn't seem like you had much else going on at that time, and you were able to make it all work. You gambled on music and you won. Thank you for telling your story, and thank you for your time, man.
Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate all of that. Thank you very much.
So that's our podcast. I've got to jump on another call in 1 minute. I'm so sorry. I thought our little delay kind of messed me up a little bit, but
I'm sorry about that.
No, dude, you made an hour and a half for me, dude. I don't care at all. But yeah, is it cool if I give you a call later on to talk about stickers?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Hit me up anytime.
So that was time with Branden Steineckert. And this podcast was early on in my sticker days, like week 2. And I had this scheduled during work hours. So I had a call scheduled on top of that, which really I should have rescheduled, but I didn't. And this podcast was cut short because I had a call with a guy who was on his last day of work somewhere. And while it was a good call, it wasn't going to drum up any sticker business as he was gone from his company the next day. So I should have been much later to the call with the potential client in the sticker world and stuck on the line with Branden and talked about all his life and times, but I didn't. I'm bummed on that, but that's what happens when you're new to a new job and you want to perform. But either way, we didn't hit as much about Rancid as I wanted to, which is a bummer, but Branden really was an open book, and that was awesome to hear about his life and times. Finally, if you're a pickleballer, you need to check out Branden's Ghost Pickleball. Please check out Branden's Ghost Pickleball Black Friday deals. If you're into music and you're into pickleball, well, why not support a musician who makes a pickleball paddle? And that's Branden with Ghost Paddle. And that's Branden with Ghost Pickleball. That's the podcast. At this point, please review me wherever you listen. Subscribe while you're at it. And please support my support my incredible sponsors who make this show happen. They are Insta360 Action Camera, Elon Skis, Stanley, Outdoor Research, Best Day Brewing, and Thermic and Descent Socks. Have a great week, everyone.